Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at some sources claiming there's a global conflict, but maybe not the kind you're thinking of. Not bombs, not missiles.
Right. It's supposedly being fought entirely inside your mind.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really unpack the blueprint for what this material is calling fifth-generation psychological war.
Yeah, and we should say right off the bat, we're wading into a really contentious framework here.
Okay?
The source material claims there's this systematic conflict, and it says it's waged by a specific enemy. It names them the Kazerians, and that they're working with what it calls captured governments.
Captured governments?
Yeah, against, well, basically the general population.
Yeah.
Using information and cognitive manipulation.
Wow, that's a lot of very specific language right there.
Mm-hmm.
Before we dig deeper, maybe we need to clarify what this source even means by fifth-generation unrestricted warfare. What is that?
Right. A quick definition is probably necessary. So in this context, it refers to conflict that's primarily below the level of actual armed combat. It's focused on like non-state actors, diffuse targets, and critically manipulating how people think, societal destabilization. It's a war over belief, over perception.
Okay, and the source is super specific about the location, right? It says the psychological war is fought entirely in your noggin.
Mm-hmm.
So our job then is to pull out the actual strategies, the frankly wild predictions, and the very specific psychological techniques this material claims are being used. By both sides, I guess.
Yes, both the alleged aggressors and the proposed resistance. And if we look at the strategic position of this alleged enemy, the sources claim something quite interesting, almost contradictory. They maintain that these Kazerians are actually on the ropes.
On the ropes, like losing.
Yeah, suggesting desperation, because their complex, multi-level global plans are apparently failing.
But hang on, if they're on the ropes, how does that square with the idea they're still causing, massive harm or casualties? Seems like a contradiction. How does the material explain that? Desperation versus damage.
Well, the material kind of suggests the damage is more like a residual effect. Stuff from long-term planning that's now executed mainly through fear. The source uses this really vivid analogy. The enemy spends ages telling you what they'll do, then pulls the trigger and the gun just goes clack, clack, clack.
Ah, empty.
Right. They're out of, let's say, conventional ammo, so they're doubling down on the psychological game. That's the idea presented.
And that psychological game hinges on something fundamental about this type of war, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The material says once someone realizes the battle is on, you can't really unrealize it.
Exactly. That awareness, once it clicks, it's apparently irreversible intellectually.
Which is why, according to the source, the conflict has to stay psychological. The other strategies didn't work, so they cling to messing with our heads.
And yes, the material definitely claims there are millions of casualties already.
Millions. From psychological war.
That's the claim. The sources identified two specific groups. First, people involved in that recent public health crisis. It says everybody that took the shot. And second, those who have undergone gender transition procedures. The material explicitly lists both as casualties of this war. Very specific, very provocative claims.
Okay, wow. So given that pretty grim assessment of casualties, what's the counterplan? The sources must propose something, right?
They do. The resistance plan centers on orchestrating a kind of mass awakening.
An awakening.
Yeah. The main goal is to bring a level of awareness of the common enemy to the public.
Okay, awareness of the enemy. Who are they trying to reach specifically?
This is key. The material defines the unaware population as people who still believe the Naradigm is functional.
The Naradigm. What's that?
It's their term for, like, the shared manufactured reality, the societal framework. So these people believe this construct in their head is, factual, organic, real. They don't see it as constructed.
Right. So the resistance needs to focus on people who need to be, quoting the source here, disabused of the shit that's been shoved in their brain by their schooling.
That's the phrasing. Yeah. It's about breaking that manufactured reality.
Okay.
And the source makes a very, very specific prediction about this. Quantifiable, even.
Oh, yeah.
They forecast this massive, specific group, they call it a tranche, of normies who are supposedly about ready to get really awakened.
A tranche of normies. How many?
What's fascinating is the number. They claim it's only 3 to 4% of the population.
Only 3 to 4%, not like the 10% tipping point you sometimes hear about.
Exactly. They specifically argue against the 10% threshold often cited in social change theories.
Why? Why is that smaller percentage the key? Why not aim for 10?
Well, the author seems to suggest this 3-4% group is uniquely positioned for like immediate reaction, ready to pop. And this awakening, according to the sources, is supposed to happen really fast, a very short period.
How fast?
Because psychological stress reaches a pinnacle fear point. The prediction, when the source was written, was actually for late March or about 6 weeks out. Very specific timing.
Okay, late March. And what's the measurable result? How would we know if this awakening happened?
Also quantified, this newly aware group, the 3-4%, will be compelled.
Compelled, not forced.
Right, the source is clear on that. Compelled to seek out certain solid conspiracy figures. Names are mentioned.
Like who?
The material forecasts seeing a 5-fold or even 10-fold jump in view rates for figures like Max Egan, Dr. Robert Malone, and someone called Finderella online.
So a concrete metric, check their view counts.
Okay. Yeah, it gives the prediction something testable, at least in theory. Now, to understand the strategies they claim are being used, we need to look at the source's take on the history of psychological control.
History, like where did this stuff come from?
They point fingers. They cite Sigmund Freud, and the source actually uses his birth name, Schlommo Sigismund Freud, calling him a major Kazerian influence.
Freud, really, as a key figure in developing these alleged control tools.
That's the claim. Instrumental in developing the psychological tools used today for control.
So, okay, following that logic, the alleged Kazarian psychological goals are pretty straightforward then.
Seems so. Destabilize people's mental foundations, crank up anxiety and fear.
Why? To what end?
To cause behavior changes, the source says. To herd the population, create instability, then direct the movement. Classic control tactic, really.
Okay. And the other side, the humanities supporters, as the source calls them, what's their approach?
Their efforts are described as explicitly anti-Kazarian and anti-psychological warfare.
How so?
Because their main effort is apparently to calm people down, to actively reduce fear levels.
Ah, so if fear is the weapon, calmness is the shield.
Basically, yeah. The material argues that if you can lower that baseline anxiety, you take away the primary tool the other side is using.
Is there an example of this calmness as counter-warfare?
Yeah, a specific plan is cited, something called First Aid for Ohio.
First Aid for Ohio.
It involved giving people practical, simple things they could do to feel better, to calm their minds, even if the advice was pretty general.
NVIs.
The source claims that normies, the general population, naturally gravitate towards people who seem nice and calm. So projecting calm becomes a way to diffuse fear, a core anti-war tactic.
Interesting. Reducing fear, projecting calm. Okay.
Now let's shift gears a bit. There's this incredible case study the source provides to explain how paranoia can be weaponized.
A case study.
Yeah, the speaker talks about developing psychological tactics personally back in high school.
High school? Seriously?
Yeah, against a psychology teacher who was apparently trying to get him to submit to his will. Heavy stuff for high school.
Okay, so what was the tactic? What did he do?
Pure psych warfare, but really simple. Performative observation. He'd stand across from the classroom door and just like repeatedly clap and shout, "Hooray, hooray, hooray," for the teacher as he left, acting friendly, but watching him intently.
Clapping for him. That's it.
That was the start. But the escalation is key to understanding how it works on a larger scale. It began with just him and maybe 2 friends clapping. But then it grew. Soon, half of the people in the hall start clapping, even though they had no idea why they were clapping.
Just joining in?
Yeah. And within a week, apparently, this teacher was getting clapped for no matter where he went on campus.
Wow. Okay, that's kind of intense. But why did it work? Why did it freak the teacher out? There has to be more to it.
Yes. The kicker, as the source calls it. This is the critical part. The teacher became super paranoid because, allegedly, he was having a secret affair with a high school girl.
Oh.
And he thought the clappers somehow knew his secret, even though they didn't have a clue.
So it wasn't the clapping itself, it was what he thought the clapping meant.
Exactly. The source says the technique inherently makes the victim think somebody knows something about me. It leverages their existing guilt. They project their secrets onto the observation.
Okay, I see. So the high school prank showed that manufactured observation, even based on nothing, can exploit someone's hidden guilt. How does the source connect that to, say, influencing a whole government body?
This is the bridge they make. That historical tactic is connected directly to a current alleged application. Using mass correspondence, they call it the vox populi, voice of the people, to target legislators. And crucially, not just the politicians, but their key legislative
The
assistants.
stackers, why them?
Because, the source argues, they control the information flow. They often do the bulk of the actual thinking and work for the legislators. They're the gatekeepers.
Okay, target the staff. With what message? More clapping.
I know. But the message is designed to induce maximum paranoia, echoing that high school tactic. The material claims the message is blunt. We are watching you. Everybody that works around you are our spies.
Wow, that's direct.
The goal is to make anyone involved in, let's say, illegal shit, their words. Again, think their specific personal wrongdoings are already known by the resistance, by the public, by someone.
So it's leveraging potential guilt on a massive scale.
Exactly. And this is described as the strategic stealing of the herd.
Stealing the herd.
Yeah, the argument is the Kazerians, the alleged enemy, had already messed with people's minds, created instability through fear of external stuff, right?
Okay.
So this resistance effort supposedly takes advantage of that pre-existing mental instability, that fear, to steal the herd, give them a new direction to walk in.
A new fear to focus on.
A change in behavior driven not by vague external threats, but by fear of personal exposure. Very different motivator.
Okay. So, threat and exposure. What's next in this psychological playbook?
The next phase, according to the source, is reinforcing that paranoia by detailing exactly how secrets will supposedly be found.
Tight.
This involves the explicit technical use of OSINT, open source intelligence.
OSINT. Right. So, using publicly available information. We hear about that a lot. What specific OSINT tactics does the material claim are planned against these staffers?
They get incredibly specific, and it sounds designed to maximize the fear of being watched. They talk about writing scripts to automate surveillance, watching targets' Twitter, Facebook feeds, patterns of life stuff.
Standard OSINT, maybe?
But then it gets more aggressive, finding out where they live. And then, the source claims, actually stealing security camera feeds to confirm movements.
Stealing camera feeds. That's quite an escalation from clapping.
Absolutely. The stated goal is to create this pervasive, inescapable feeling that somebody knows something about me. Constant, verifiable surveillance, or at least the belief in it.
Yeah, finally, there's something about volume.
Yeah.
Using sheer numbers.
Yes. The material outlines a plan for a psychological offensive that relies purely on overwhelming the targets. The plan is supposedly to get anywhere from 1,000 to maybe 10,000 people to send individualized emails weekly to the Washington state legislature.
Individualized emails, not just form letters.
Right, individualized. And the assertion is that the volume itself is the weapon. The source claims that even just 1,000 people sending these specific tailored emails would effectively shut the system down.
Oh.
Because the legislative staff simply couldn't cope. They couldn't handle that level of intense, focused attention and scrutiny. It's about overwhelming them, making them feel individually targeted, exposed, and unable to function.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up for the listener. We've gone pretty deep here on these claims.
Yeah.
Describing a global conflict fought with psychological stability as the main weapon, resulting in some very specific, testable predictions about a mass awakening, that 3 to 4% group, and the deliberate use of manufactured paranoia drawn from a high school prank as a counter tactic against governments and their staff. It's quite a narrative.
It really is. And if we connect it back to the bigger picture, this material essentially frames perception itself, what you believe, what you fear, as the absolute critical front line in this kind of modern warfare.
Perception is the battlefield.
Which raises a pretty important question, I think, for you, the listener. What does it actually mean when reality itself is openly described as a constructed Naradigm, and when behavior, even at the highest levels of government, can supposedly be altered just by manipulating fear or by inducing paranoia through the feeling of being constantly watched?
A really powerful thought to end on. Consider the power, maybe, of just seeming to know a secret, even if you don't. That psychological pressure, the source claims, is the ultimate weapon in whatever this current conflict is supposed to be. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.